What's the worst date you've ever been on? Wasn't necessarily the date, which was bad on its own, but the fact that she hung out in my parking lot for 2 hours after she dropped me off in case I changed my mind about doing something after dinner. Back in college I was invited to an ice rink with a girl I liked and some of her friends. I did not know how to ice skate and I did not pick it up very quickly, but I wanted to try and impress her somehow. Well, I hugged the wall the whole time and made a fool of myself. The highlight was when I saw a flash of light as I fell in front of a group of people. Turns out I had fallen right at the moment someone took a picture, so my failure was immortalized forever. She took me back to my apartment and ended the relationship before it began. On a lighter note, the woman who is now my wife was at that ice rink on that night. We didn't realize we were there the same time until a year or two into our relationship and she exclaimed, "You were that guy who couldn't ice skate." Yeah? She didn't seem that into you. He was more than 3 hours late and was texting me telling me that he was 20 minutes away for 2 of those hours. As soon as he arrived he tried to tell me to leave the part of the venue dive bar I'd already paid into so we could go where he wanted. Tried to start a fight with a friend I'd happened to run into. And called my aunt, who'd talked me into going out with him in the first place, a cock-blocking bitch. I just walked away from him after that last one. And we never spoke again. I waited so long because I liked the bands that were playing. I wouldn't have stayed if I was sitting around doing nothing. He got there just before the last band finished. But I'd had about enough of him by then because he'd been telling me that he was on the train in the same place for 2 hours. We don't live out in the middle of nowhere and he could have easily gotten a bus or tram the rest of the way in that time if there was a problem with the train. He never gave me a proper excuse, but I didn't really care at that point. Went on a blind date with a lady who wouldn't stop picking at her scabs. Just made a pile out of them on the restaurant table. I excused myself to use the washroom and when I came back my soup was there but the pile of scabs wasn't. No, I didn't eat the soup. Guy told me he just recently got out of a long-term relationship so he wasn't looking for a commitment but asked me if he could be my maintenance man as he stroked his pee-pee through his jeans. Made plans with this guy I knew from a charity I was on the board with. He takes me a chain Mexican restaurant. I pull up a few minutes early. But my dad flies a plane and was going to be flying overhead of the restaurant and I wanted to see him fly over. At 8 o'clock sharp. The guy calls me and tells me that I am late. I try to explain the whole flyby thing. He isn't having it. We go inside and I try to order some food and he tells me that we are not getting food and that I can't eat. Then he starts going off on major political rants which I'm completely opposed to. I ask him if this is all a joke or if he is being serious. I finally convince him to at least get an appetizer. I was not allowed to choose. He got guacamole, tableside, but only had them put onions and the avocado. I was planning my escape when he asked, "Are you figuring out how you are going to leave?" "Yep. Thanks for the one domestic beer. Bye." I went out with a guy that my roommate set me up with a few years ago. First, he was vocally irritated that I wore heels, BC it made him less taller than me. Note: he was still taller than me by a few inches, but just less taller. Dinner went alright, although we didn't have a whole lot in common. After dinner, we met back up with my roommate and her boyfriend and we all went to a house party of their friends. I basically knew no one at the party. My date's somewhat newly ex-girlfriend was there. To summarize, she called me a whore, spilled my drink on me, threatened to fight me, told me she gave him herpes, left, came back an hour later looking for me, hugged me, grabbed my ass, and apologized and told me I was hot. So I guess it went pretty well by the end of the night. We spent most of the date going shopping for clothes for another date she had later that week. It's kinda funny seeing as how she was the one that asked me out. I went on a Tinder date with a guy who is now in my contacts as Donut and Swapinaspic. Prior to the date he seemed normal. We texted and talked on the phone, then arranged to meet at a restaurant bar. He was cute but definitely bitter about something. He was from California and apparently didn't like this new city we were in. He started talking about hanky-panky and blowjobs and complaining about how uptight everyone here is about sex. He invited the waitress to a party his company was throwing. After sending back the french fries he ordered, I showed him a picture of my dog on my phone. He took out his phone and showed me a picture of his penis. We walked out of the restaurant together to get our cars from the valet. My car came first and I left. He texted me later that he had my sweater. Apparently I dropped it on the way out, and if I wanted to see it again I'd have to hang out with him. RIP. Sweater. I've got a couple. Meet a guy from OkCupid. He seems nice, but never stops talking. After interrupting me for the third or fourth time, I finally asked him, do you want to hear anything I have to say? He apologizes profusely. Says you're right. I'm so sorry, and pulls out a pad of paper and a pen. He then jots notes as I'm telling him about myself and whatnot. I finally asked him what he's doing and he says, oh, I'm writing down things I want to tell you when it's my turn to talk again. Met another guy from OKC. He knowingly used pictures that didn't accurately reflect the way he looked and kept saying you look just like your pics in shock. He then told me I reminded him of his mother. Like it was a good thing. Edit, didn't think this would blow up. I did end up giving guy number 1 a second chance. He said he was just nervous. But on our second date, he had burned me a CD of his favorite music, after I had already told him I don't really listen to much music, and had written 100s of decimals of pi out on the makeshift CD cover. I also hate math. He didn't really listen to anything I had to say, so I let him down easy. Once in the throes of desperation I decided to try and meet someone on Craigslist. I found a posting that seemed like a nice, not insane, fairly reasonable person that seemed to have common interests, and we got along pretty well during our email exchange. We met up at a local outdoor mall to walk around and chat for a bit and decide where to go from there. She was far bigger than I had been led to believe, had definite facial hair, and smelled terrible. Like a trooper. I decided to stick it out, because maybe she's really nice in person. I figured worst case scenario, contact with someone who wasn't a coworker or my family would be nice. Over the course of the date, she made multiple references to how nice it was to see so many other couples out and about that day, and attempted to name our future children and discuss weddings. There were some other red flag conversations that I don't recall, but it was odd. There was not a second date. I went out for dinner and a movie with a guy. I tried to chip in money at both, but he insisted that he cover it all. At the end of the night, we're sitting in his car in the parking lot of the restaurant we had just eaten at, and he asks for a BJ, saying I bought you dinner and took you to a movie. It's the least you can do. Thankfully I live nearby. I hopped out and walked home. Finally, a place to tell this story. I had a very disappointing date in high school. It was the dead of winter, like 40 Celsius. We had gone to a movie, and the whole thing was really awkward. She didn't really seem to want to be there, was very detached. After the movie and the bus trip home, she admitted that the only reason she even agreed to the date with me is because my friend had turned her down a few days earlier. I wasn't aware of that at the time. That a pretty big letdown and waste of time. But I figured whatever. I'll head home and find something else to spend time on. I'll get over it eventually. I got off the bus and just wanted to get home as soon as possible. At the bus stop there is a thigh-high railing around the front of the nearby parking lot. Instead of walking around it, I decided to step onto and then over it. The second I stepped onto it, I realized it was coated in ice. I Charlie Browned the frick out. Just flipped through the air. Lost everything in my pockets. Ripped my pants from Master Zipper. And then came down hard right onto the railing with my shin, fracturing it. It's still 40 out. I can't just lay there till help comes. So I fish around in the snow. Grab my stuff. Try to stuff my balls back into my pants. And stagger home. TLDR, it's not me, it's you. Limped home, balls in the wind. I was a barista in a cafe during college and this loyal customer asked me out. Took me to sushi. Took me to bar and bought me a drink. Conversation good. Nothing spectacular, but he was cute and intelligent and funny. When he takes me home, he parks outside of my house and assumes he's coming in. I'm like, no. Genuinely confused. He asks why not. He bought me dinner and a drink. And we should have hanky panky now. Because that's how it goes. And then we start arguing about it and I start to worry that he's going to just like enter my apartment whether I like it or not. I am having to literally explain that just because he bought me dinner does not mean I have to frick him. Just listen to this. Prince is sexy. All girls like Prince. I think I may have run when I finally got out of his car. Girl never showed up. I was stood up. I just moved to the bar and drank and ate buffalo wings. The girl who brought her sister along to chaperone. Awesome. I had met this really attractive Russian girl on Match.com and after talking for a few days we decided to get dinner. It was just awkward and she kept on making it purposely more awkward by ignoring me. Rolling her eyes and constantly staring around at things. She got really annoyed our food wasn't coming after about 5 minutes. It was just so bizarre because on the phone we had gotten along pretty great but she just refused to make small talk during the date. Who does that? When the waitress came and asked about the check I blurted out separate. Took girl to movies. I now realize not the best location for first dates. She asks can my best friend come too? There goes my chances basically. I say of course you can. Trying to be nice. Was also assuming it was going to be a girl. Shows up with her friend. Who is indeed a guy. This is when I find out that it's her one and only ex. But they remain best friends and nothing is happening between them. Well, this date is ruined. Let's try to salvage it. Go to pay for our tickets, me and her. Even when she offered to pay for hers. After buying, she turns around and buys her ex's ticket. We actually got along fine and they were nice people. But it was like a tug of war for the rest of the night fighting for her attention. Of course I lose. They are best friends. When I get home the guy adds me on Facebook. And he proceeds to tell me don't bother trying to date her. She's a terrible girlfriend. Thanks for the heads up. I finally got her alone for one more movie. But it all just sort of fell apart. I actually really liked her. But clearly I had no effect on her. Oh well, I guess. Take note future daters. This is a bad idea. Met her in her adult soccer league. Asked her to grab breakfast that weekend. She accepted. Picked her up. Took her to a hole-in-the-wall diner. Ordered the garden omelette. Throughout the meal she talked about all the poop she was into. Breath play. Being dominated. Being hit, but not too hard. Whips and cuffs. As Kevin Hart would say. She was getting too kinky too fast. Got the check. Realized my wallet was in my gym bag from the night before. I apologized. She paid for us both. And I took her back to her place. She invited me in. And I couldn't refuse as she had just bought me a meal. An hour later. After the dirtiest hanky panky of my life up to that point. We were lying in bed when she gets a text and panics. Oh my god. You have to leave, my boyfriend got off work early and if he finds us he'll kick me out. This is the first I'm hearing of her so. And I realize that I just fricked a chick on her boyfriend's bed after she bought me breakfast with money he gave her. Frick. So I throw on half my clothes. Jump into my car. And knock over the mailbox in my rush to get the hell out of Dodge. When I get home. I see that my rear bumper has a nice new crack. TL. Doctor took girl out for breakfast. Forgot wallet. Had to kinky sex. Found out she had a long-term boyfriend. Damaged my car in my getaway. And now she keeps texting me. I was really young. Probably about 15 or so. I was boy crazy. I had a crush on every guy who even remotely expressed an interest in me. But this guy. There are no words to describe this guy. His name was Jesse. We met through a mutual friend. And while he wasn't exactly my type, he told me he thought I was pretty, and so I wanted to give him a chance. A couple weeks later we decide to meet up at the mall for our first official date. He was very sweet. We were holding hands. You know, typical teenage bullpoop. But then he got weird. Very weird. We're sitting on this bench and he turns to me and stares at me right in the eyes and says, "Wow. When I look at you and I look into your eyes, I feel like I'm looking into your soul." Akaye. I'm 15 and desperate for an epic love story, so I just smile. He goes on, "DFTBA Wessam. I know this seems soon, but I think you might be my soulmate. I can't wait until the day we can get married and have babies and live together. We're going to have such an amazing life together, so let me recap. I'm 15. I'm on a first date. And my date just essentially proposed to me. I noped the frick out of there and never talked to him again. TLDR, hey. I just met you. And this is crazy. But you're my soulmate. Please have my babies." Met at work over the summer a few years back. Figured a movie made the most sense, so there wasn't time for awkward conversation lulls. Lo and behold. Picked girl with a dragon tattoo because I never read it. That was awkward. Met a girl in a bar. Bought her a drink. Agreed to meet again. Went to her house to pick her up. Her dad comes to the door angry and screams, "The frick do you want with my 17-year-old daughter?" Exclamation point. I tried to explain how I met her and he screamed her name and slammed the door. I quickly left and renamed her number as "Do Not Answer." About 10 minutes from picking a girl up, she asked me to pull to the side of the road to take a poop and then proceeds to poop in front of my car. Edit. This is now my most upvoted comment, so thank you for making me laugh about it again. First date. The girl started lighting matches. Would put them out with her fingers. Then eat the burnt matchstick head. TLDR, dated Satan. Got stood up at a cafe. She called and told me an emergency had come up and she wasn't going to make it. I had only been waiting for 3 or 4 minutes. And wasn't too upset about it. So I called a friend to see what he was doing. Ended up meeting him across town at the bar he was drinking at, where he introduced me to my date he had just met playing pool there. A guy in college took me out. Not to a Chinese restaurant, but to the parking lot of a Chinese restaurant to look at a tacky plastic Buddha statue. We had to walk through several blocks of sketchy area in the dark to get there. And he kept rubbing my back the entire way there and back even after I asked him to stop. I've only had one bad one. And it was this girl who wouldn't shut up about her ex. It was, predictably, our only date. I went to the movie Schindler's List on a first and last date when I was like 16 years old. Oh, I got this. So met a girl online and we started talking. Everything was grand. She and I texted often and seemed to be hitting it off well. So we meet and start having dinner. Everything is good except she just seems a bit off. We order a pitcher of margaritas. We each have one and in mid-sentence she just stops talking and stares at her hands. Just looking at them. I ask if she's okay and she says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just really drunk." I say, "Really? We'd only had one drink." She says, "Then no. I've been drinking all day." Now, I stop and think about past conversations. She texted me a lot saying, "Hey, I'm a little drunk walking home, keep me company." I start thinking this might be a trend with her. She then proceeds to faceplant into the table. I think she's joking because it was so exaggerated. I laugh and realize she isn't moving. I tap her and wake her and I call for the check. Which was a lot more than I'd figured. She then asks if I could walk her home. I said I would as she was in pretty rough shape. We start walking more and more and then I ask how much farther. She says another mile. So we walk some more and finally get to her place. She offers me some water and then asks if I want to stay. I politely declined and she kicked me out. So that was that. I had to use a GPS to find my way back to my car. Hey you, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and hitting like. Also, if you have an Alexa device, you can say Alexa, open Reddit stories, to hear some of the all-time top AskReddit posts. Thanks for watching.